Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, facing the formidable Michael, Ciel activated the emergency protection mode. Hidden in the shadows, Chloe intervened at a critical moment, successfully protecting Rimuru and defeating Michael. Not only that, but Chloe used her hidden skill, Reverse Fate, to devolve Manus Michael back into the Lord of Justice and incorporated it into her own skill set. This allowed the Lord of Space and Time to further evolve into the God of Space and Time. Meanwhile, Ciel and Rimuru also managed to comprehend the essence of time stop, and Rimuru evolved further into digital nature. In this episode, we will analyze the second half of the decisive battle between Rimuru and Michael. Let's get started. Rimuru and Chloe defeated Michael within the stop time, which, to others unaware of the stopped world, made it seem as if Michael suddenly disappeared and Chloe suddenly appeared. For instance, to Sue, who was hiding in the shadows, after Chloe lifted the time stop, Sue immediately sent a thought communication to Rimuru, blaming himself for not being able to find Michael. Rimuru instructed Sue to remain on standby and not take any action. Through a brief conversation, Sue quickly understood. With Sue's high battle intelligence, Rimuru didn't need to explain much. If it had been Veldora or Ramirez, he would probably have had to explain for another 3 to 5 minutes before they understood. Then Rimuru began his performance. He claimed that if Chloe hadn't appeared in time, Michael would have killed him. However, Chloe immediately criticized Rimuru's poor acting, saying it was too exaggerated. Rimuru was speechless. He claimed that his straightforward nature made him ill-suited for deception. Giving up on adding drama, Rimuru ordered Chloe to return to the Monster Federation to rest and adjust, absorbing the results of her evolution as soon as possible. With a trusting look in her eyes, Chloe left the battlefield. The next moment, Rimuru pointed towards an empty corner, indicating he knew Michael was hiding there. Michael was shocked. He was confident that he had perfectly concealed his presence, yet Rimuru easily discovered him. It's worth noting that Michael's hiding method involved the fusion of Lord of Judgment and Ario's unique skill Murder, creating a new sub-skill called Existence Concealment, which could completely hide Michael's aura. However, even when Michael asked how, Rimuru could only answer that it was his intuition. Rimuru and Ciel shared a soul, a very unique existence, which meant they couldn't divide their consciousness and thus couldn't use parallel existence. But if the situation were reversed, if Rimuru were Michael, he would definitely leave a parallel existence and launch a sudden attack when the enemy let their guard down thinking they had won. In the previous episode, Rimuru exchanged glances with Chloe, intending to remind her of this matter, but Chloe later indicated she had only absorbed a small portion of Michael's expected energy, confirming it was Michael's parallel existence. However, this parallel existence also contained all the information of Lord of Justice and did not hinder Chloe's skill evolution. Rimuru originally planned to use Michael's sudden attack against him but ultimately decided it was better to face the enemy leader head-on and crush his ambitions. Michael regained his composure when he realized that Rimuru had merely guessed his intentions and had not seen through his skills. However, he was still surprised that his parallel existence had been defeated. Rimuru corrected Michael, stating that it was Chloe, not himself, who defeated him. Michael then praised Hero Cronoa, but Rimuru corrected him again, saying it was Chloe, not Cronoa. Rimuru then declared that he would not correct Michael again. After all, this would be Michael's final resting place. Upon hearing Rimuru's bold declaration, Michael found it somewhat amusing, stating that Rimuru was only hiding under the shelter of the strongest hero and had no right to make such grand statements. Nevertheless, Rimuru wasn't angry and explained that Chloe was his student, and as her teacher, he should demonstrate his true strength. Hearing this, Michael's gaze remained icy. From the perspective of someone who could stop time, Rimuru's boastful words were totally nonsense. Michael reiterated that although Rimuru was an obstacle, he was by no means a match for him. As soon as he finished speaking, time stopped once again. Michael, with a confident expression of assured victory, swung his sword at Rimuru. However, this time, Rimuru was no longer the same as before. In this silent world, the sound of two swords clashing rang out. Michael was shocked, while Rimuru, with a mischievous grin, announced that he had also learned how to move in the stopped world. From that moment, Michael recognized Rimuru as a foe that must be eliminated. His disdainful attitude vanished. Thus, the two began their battle, wagering the fate of the world. Michael deeply felt his own naivety. Initially, he had underestimated the slime, only for Rimuru to defeat Velgrind. Later, Michael was confident he could defeat Rimuru head-on, but now Rimuru had managed to enter the exclusive stopped world. It seemed this slime would always hinder Michael's plans, regardless of the situation. Given this, stopping time was meaningless. Michael decided to stop wasting energy, and instead unleash his full power to crush his opponent with overwhelming strength. Michael had this confidence because he had acquired the dragon factors of Velzard and Velgrind, greatly enhancing his energy and physical form to an invincible level. Additionally, the Lord of Justice, being the strongest angelic ultimate skill, allowed Michael to fully utilize all angelic ultimate skills under his control. For example, by analyzing Velzard's Lord of Patience, Michael had gained formidable defensive capabilities and the ability to stop time. Furthermore, from Velgrind's Lord of Charity, Michael acquired immense offensive power. In addition, the Lord of Purity, reclaimed from Leon, improved his energy efficiency. Having become such a powerful being, Michael was confident that he could win any battle. Even Abra's 300,000 phantom army was annihilated by him in an instant. Despite just being defeated by hero Chloe, that was merely a parallel existence with less than 20% of his total energy. Now, with all his energy restored, Michael believed himself to be perfect and invincible. However, things weren't that simple. None of Michael's attacks had any effect on Rimuru, not even his most powerful offensive skill, Cardinal Acceleration, which was instantly devoured by Rimuru. On the other hand, Rimuru handled all the attacks with ease. He couldn't help but remark on how simple and straightforward Michael's attacks were. Rimuru decided to let Ciel take control of his body while he watched the battle from the sidelines. In an instant, Rimuru's eyes changed color. The book described them as gold, but in the anime, Ciel's eyes were red, so we'll follow that depiction. The threat level of Rimuru increased instantly, and this strange sensation made Michael wary. Since his attacks were ineffective, Michael decided to focus on defense. Although he couldn't use Castle Guard, he still had the snow crystal from the Lord of Patience. This skill brought the surrounding air to absolute zero, locking it in that state with fixation, wrapping them in an indestructible object that could even block the motion of spirit particles. Michael unhesitatingly enveloped his body with the absolute defense of snow crystal. However, an astonishing scene unfolded. Rimuru effortlessly poked a hole in the snow crystal barrier. Rimuru seemed quite surprised, but even more shocked was Michael, who involuntarily exclaimed, asking what Rimuru had done. Rimuru calmly replied that he had eaten the snow crystal defensive barrier. Rimuru explained that this was his skill, though he hadn't expected it to be capable of eating barriers. Again, Rimuru was now controlled by Ciel. Ciel had intended to give it a try, and it turned out to be successful. Michael felt a sense of alarm. He couldn't comprehend what was happening. He had always taken actions based on logical deductions, so facing this irrational situation was beyond his understanding. However, the reality was undeniable. Michael realized that if either attack nor defense worked, he should escape immediately. At the same time, another voice suggested that Michael should stay and continue gathering information. After all, Michael could use parallel existence. Even if he died here, he could be revived. This reckless behavior was driven by his confidence in his resurrection abilities, knowing that the Lord of Justice also resided within Fellway. However, the escape route had long been sealed. Michael seemed to hear an unknown voice indicating that this area had been enclosed within Rimuru's imaginary space, making escape impossible. Given the circumstances, Michael declared he would fight to the end. He decided to summon the strongest sword, Deva, instead of using the sword in his hand. However, the mythical sword Deva, created by Veldinava, did not respond. What Michael didn't know was that another fierce battle was taking place in Ingrassia at the same time, and Deva had already returned to its original owner, Rudra. This was a misstep by Michael. When a person becomes too powerful, they tend to overlook many details, and this applied to Michael as well. If Michael had mastered parallel existence like Velgrind or understood the battle situation through Feldway's eyes, he would have grasped the current situation. However, Michael had only transferred the functionality of the Lord of Justice to Feldway without fully synchronizing with it. Sealed within the imaginary space, Michael had no way of transmitting his consciousness outside. Therefore, even if a parallel existence existed, it would have power but no consciousness. Michael, being powerful enough, assumed that exchanging information later face-to-face would suffice, leading to this failure. In contrast, Rimuru had always been very cautious, especially valuing communication networks and information synchronization. Eliminating information gaps is crucial in battle. Given the circumstances, Michael had no choice but to infuse his divine aura into the sword he had been using. Rimuru hesitated for a moment, but then took a defensive stance with his sword, asking what Deva was. Michael had no intention of explaining, and Rimuru, controlled by Ciel, showed rare displeasure. Ciel's intense curiosity not being satisfied frustrated her. As Michael's divine aura intensified, Rimuru's expression grew serious. Thus, the two prepared for their final clash. Without Deva, Michael couldn't use Rudra's ultimate sword technique, Nova Break. However, Michael had taken Rudra's body and inherited his swordsmanship, further enhanced by the Lord of Purity's refined energy. Thus, Michael opted for Melt Slash. On the other side, Rimuru fearlessly unleashed his hidden technique, Imaginary Collapse Haze, Myriad Variety Petals. Generously revealing his ultimate move was a mark of respect for the soon-to-be-defeated opponent. This technique combined the strengths of Imaginary Collapse and Hazy Style, creating the most powerful attack. In an instant, Rimuru's sword aura filled the entire domain, with his sword technique's ever-changing paths slashing at Michael, turning him into beautiful, scattering petals. This level of power was beyond what a demon lord could achieve. Even Rimuru needed Ciel's assistance to control it. It combined the toughness of true dragons with the flexibility of a slime, representing Rimuru's ultimate swordsmanship. Michael lost. He realized his body was disintegrating and had little time left. Rimuru asked if Michael had any last words. Michael pondered deeply, wondering why he failed despite being stronger in every way. Unable to find an answer, he begrudgingly asked Rimuru who he really was. At this point, it seemed Rimuru and Ciel switched control again, although the book didn't specify here. This switch would make the story flow more smoothly in my opinion. Rimuru paused, then simply stated he was just a slime. Michael found this answer absurd and felt foolish for asking such a question. Despite his body falling apart, he felt an unexpected sense of joy, an emotion he had never experienced since being abandoned by his master and developing a self-consciousness. Michael mockingly thought that life doesn't always go as planned and resignedly sighed, noting that the slime, which he couldn't understand, was still pretending to be naive. Michael's disintegration accelerated, his body transforming into light and gradually vanishing. At this moment, the slime spoke up, saying that he was not alone and that Michael could discuss his situation later with his partner. After saying this, Rimuru ended the conversation and reached out towards Michael. The God of Void, Rimuru's most powerful ultimate skill, revealed its fangs, and then soul gluttony devoured everything from Michael. In truth, Michael knew that creator god Veldinava-sama had abandoned him, but he didn't want to admit it. Refusing to acknowledge this, he had struggled until now. But it was all over. Michael felt a warmth enveloping him, a nostalgic comfort. As he slowly faded away, he understood that perhaps it had all been a misunderstanding. This place had everything, and he felt he was becoming part of it. Michael no longer felt alone. This was perhaps his destined conclusion. He felt a sense of fulfillment, with the only regret being that he left his friend Feldway behind as he passed away alone. Michael's consciousness then completely dissipated. Rimuru reflected on the battle. Since Michael's attacks were too straightforward, Rimuru had handed over control to Ciel from the start and watched from above. It turned out that Ciel was extremely powerful, effortlessly neutralizing all attacks and defenses from Michael, making Rimuru almost pity Michael. In the end, the use of imaginary collapse haze, myriad variety petals, was Ciel's way of testing its effects, while Rimuru saw it as a farewell gesture to Michael with his strongest swordsmanship. Michael's final question, asking who Rimuru was, seemed strange to Rimuru. Even if asked that way, Rimuru felt that he was just Rimuru, nothing else. Rimuru suspected that Michael's question stemmed from noticing Ciel's presence, so he thought Michael should discuss it with Ciel. As Michael took pride in being a Manus, Rimuru wondered how he would react upon encountering Manus Ciel. This was why Rimuru decided to use soul gluttony for the first time. The effect of soul gluttony was also astonishing. Michael's existence points were more than 10 times that of Rimuru's normal state. Previously, gluttony couldn't devour such a powerful being. In episode 54, Rimuru struggled tremendously to devour Veldora. But soul gluttony easily consumed Michael, causing him to vanish instantly. For the first time since coming to this world, Rimuru felt a sudden fullness filling his heart, a sensation he had never experienced from eating anything before. Ciel was even more thrilled, excitedly announcing that all 7 of the strongest angelic ultimate skills, the 7 virtues, had been collected, and Velzard's dragon factor had also been acquired. Ciel began analyzing and identifying them with great joy. Seeing Ciel so happy, Rimuru felt very reassured. Immediately after, Rimuru checked on the status of his subordinates. Diablo was extremely frustrated, admitting that he had made a grave mistake this time and had no excuses. Rimuru continually comforted Diablo, explaining that it was understandable he couldn't respond to an attack that even stopped time. However, Diablo insisted he should have thought of more strategies, as his actions had failed to harm the enemy and only allowed him to protect himself, which was prone to mistakes. Diablo vowed never to make the same error again. Rimuru felt somewhat at a loss dealing with Diablo's self-reproach. Sue sincerely asked Diablo to teach him some countermeasures. Ultima also expressed that she had sensed something was wrong but found it difficult to react in such a situation, and she too earnestly requested Diablo's guidance. Diablo readily agreed to help them. The 3 of them began discussing strategies with great enthusiasm. Rimuru believed that with enough time, their preparations would not be in vain. Rimuru then ordered Diablo to take the still unconscious Leon back to the Monster Federation. Ultima was to go immediately to support Xian and Luminous, while Sue was to stay in Heaven Tower to continue investigating. This way, the only battlefield left to worry about was the capital of the Ingracia Kingdom. Alright, that's all for this video. In the battle between the 2 Manus, Ciel overwhelmingly defeated Michael. Ciel was undoubtedly the biggest winner in this fight, acquiring the information of Lord of Justice, Lord of Patience, and Lord of Purity from Michael, the Lord of Hope from Chloe, and Velzard's dragon factor. These information will undoubtedly help Ciel further develop new skills. Additionally, Michael's feeling of belonging after being absorbed is also a very interesting point. Why did Michael feel satisfied, and why did he say that this place had everything? These all highlight the uniqueness of Rimuru's existence. Feel free to discuss. In our next episode, we will switch the perspective to the capital of the Ingracia, where, at the same time, Velgrind, Testarossa, Hinata, and Masayuki were engaged in a fierce battle against the enemy generals Feldway, Vega, and Reiner. Masayuki's super bug-like skill will awaken. The next episode will be equally exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.